I stared at the address my mother had texted me 3 hours ago, the restaurant name glowing on my phone screen like an accusation. Marcello's. One of those Italian places in downtown Manhattan where the tablecloths cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and the waitstaff moved with the kind of silent efficiency that suggested they'd been trained at establishments far more exclusive than this. My family only chose places like this when they wanted to make a point. And tonight, I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly what that point would be. The hostess greeted me with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kind of expression that said she'd already sized up my simple burgundy dress and sensible flats and found them wanting. "Reservation name?" she asked, her tone polite but dismissive. "Harris," I said quietly, hating how small my voice sounded in this space. "I'm meeting my family." Her expression changed immediately, becoming warmer, more accommodating. "Of course, Miss Harris. They're already seated. Right this way, please." I followed her through the dining room, past tables occupied by couples celebrating anniversaries and business associates closing deals over expensive wine. The restaurant was beautiful in that understated way that screamed old money. Exposed brick walls decorated with original artwork, soft lighting from vintage-looking fixtures that cast everyone in a flattering golden glow, and the quiet murmur of conversation that never rose above a respectable volume. Jazz played softly through hidden speakers, something instrumental and melancholy that matched the knot forming in my stomach. My family sat at a large round table near the back, positioned perfectly so they could see the entire restaurant while maintaining a sense of privacy. My father, Richard Harris, 55 years old with graying hair and the kind of presence that demanded attention without asking for it, sat at the head. My mother, Diane, 52, elegant in a cream-colored dress and pearls that probably cost more than my monthly rent, sat to his right. My twin brother Connor occupied the seat to my father's left, looking every inch the corporate success story in his tailored navy suit. And Sophie, my younger sister at 21, sat next to our mother, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves and her green eyes already red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. None of them smiled when they saw me approaching. "Lily," my father said, his voice carrying the same tone he used in board meetings when someone had disappointed him. "Sit down." I took the empty chair between Connor and Sophie, my hands trembling slightly as I placed my small purse on my lap. The tension at the table was thick, suffocating, and I could feel other diners glancing our way with curiosity. "I'm glad you could make it," my mother said, though her voice suggested the opposite. She reached for her wine glass, taking a long sip before setting it down with careful precision. "We weren't sure you'd have the courage to show your face." My stomach dropped. They knew. Somehow, they'd found out about the anonymous report I'd filed with the SEC 3 weeks ago after accidentally seeing documents at Connor's apartment that detailed financial irregularities in my father's real estate company. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, transactions that didn't add up. I'd spent days agonizing over what to do, knowing that reporting it would destroy my relationship with my family, but unable to ignore what I'd seen. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, though the lie felt transparent even to my own ears. Connor laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Don't insult us, Lily. We got a visit from federal investigators yesterday. They had questions about some very specific accounts, transactions that only a handful of people knew about." He leaned forward, his blue eyes cold. "You were at my place 3 weeks ago. You used my bathroom. You would have walked right past my office, where I'd left those files on my desk. Connor, I didn't—" "Don't lie." My father's voice cut through the restaurant like a knife, loud enough that several nearby conversations stopped. He seemed to realize this, and lowered his volume. But the anger in his voice remained. "You went through your brother's private documents and then reported your own family to the government. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I saw illegal activity. What was I supposed to do? Just pretend I didn't see it? "Yes," my mother hissed, her elegant composure cracking. "You were supposed to keep your mouth shut and remember that family protects family. But you've always been selfish, haven't you? Always thinking you're better than us with your little library job and your moral superiority." Sophie reached across the table suddenly, her hand trembling as she pulled the silver necklace from around my neck, the one our mother had given me for my 21st birthday. The clasp broke, and she threw it onto the table between the bread basket and the wine bottle. "You don't deserve anything from this family," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. Nothing. I stared at the necklace lying there, the pendant catching the light, and felt something inside me crack. "Sophie, please. You destroyed us," Connor interrupted, his voice venomous. "Dad's company is going to be investigated. His reputation is ruined. And for what? Because you wanted to play hero? Because you couldn't mind your own business?" "It's not about playing hero," I said, my voice shaking. "It's about doing what's right. Those accounts showed money laundering, tax evasion." "We don't care what they showed," my father roared, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "You betrayed your family, your own blood, and now you're going to pay for it." The restaurant had gone almost silent now. Other diners no longer even pretending not to watch our table. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, judging, curious, entertained by the drama unfolding before them. "I want everything back," my father continued, his voice cold and calculated now. "Every gift we've given you, every dollar we've spent on you, the car we bought you for graduation. I want the title signed over by tomorrow. The furniture in your apartment that we paid for, I'm sending movers to collect it this week. And that college fund we set up when you were born, I'm closing it and redistributing it to your siblings who actually deserve it. Dad, I paid for most of my own college with scholarships and student loans. I don't care." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You are no longer my daughter. As of this moment, you are nothing to this family. Do you understand me?" "Nothing." My mother stood as well, reaching for her clutch with trembling hands. "I raised you for 24 years, she said, her voice breaking. "I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me? By destroying everything your father built." Connor rose next, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. For a heartbeat, his expression flickered, a tightness at the corner of his mouth, a hesitation in his eyes that suggested the part of him who still cared for Sophie resented this cruelty even as he enforced it. He pushed that away quickly, smoothing his face into the practiced hardness he'd perfected. "Don't bother reaching out to any of us. You're dead to me. Dead to all of us." He looked at Sophie expectantly. "Let's go." Sophie stood slowly, her face streaked with tears, but she didn't look at me. She couldn't. Or maybe she just didn't want to. My family moved as a unit toward the exit, leaving me sitting alone at the table with curious and pitying stares from every direction. I felt paralyzed, unable to move or speak, or even breathe properly, my vision blurred with unshed tears, and my hands shook so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. The waiter approached cautiously, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. "Miss, would you like—" "She's my family now." The voice came from behind me, deep and commanding, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a blade. I turned to see a man standing there, tall and imposing, with black hair and dark brown eyes that held an intensity I'd never encountered before. He wore a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing olive skin and an expensive watch on his left wrist. A gold chain glinted at his throat, where the top buttons of his shirt remained undone, and there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested both danger and absolute control. He'd been sitting at the table directly behind ours with another man, and I realized with growing mortification that he'd witnessed the entire humiliation. Earlier, when the hostess announced the reservation name, he'd glanced in our direction. A brief tightening of his jaw then suggested the name had meant something to him. Not to me, not yet, but to him. Whatever recognition that was, it turned into action in a few calm, efficient steps. "Leave," he said, not to me, but to my family, who had stopped near the exit and turned back at his interruption. His voice carried across the restaurant with quiet authority. "She's my family now. Leave." My father's face turned red. "Excuse me? Who the hell do you think you—" "I think you've said everything you needed to say," the man interrupted, his tone remaining calm, but somehow more threatening because of it. "And now you're going to leave this restaurant before you embarrass yourselves further, or before I make you leave." There was something in his posture, in the way his companion at the nearby table had also stood and was watching my family with cool assessment that made my father hesitate. Connor grabbed his arm, leaning in to whisper something urgently. Whatever he said made my father's expression change from anger to something closer to fear. Without another word, my family left, the door closing behind them with a soft chime that felt absurdly cheerful given what had just happened. The man turned to me then, and up close I could see he was probably in his mid-30s, with a jawline that could cut glass and an expression that managed to be both hard and somehow gentle at the same time. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand. "Please." I stared at his hand, at the scars on his knuckles that suggested a history of violence, and felt a moment of pure confusion. Who was this stranger? Why had he intervened? What did he want from me? But then I looked around the restaurant, at all the people still watching me with various expressions of pity and fascination, and I realized I couldn't stay here. I couldn't sit at this table alone, surrounded by the wreckage of my family, while strangers whispered about what they'd just witnessed. I took his hand. His grip was firm but not painful, warm and steady in a way that made me feel anchored when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. He helped me to my feet, and I grabbed my purse with my free hand, following him toward the exit on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Outside, the rain had started, a steady drizzle that immediately soaked through my dress. The man released my hand long enough to shrug out of his jacket and drape it over my shoulders. It smelled like expensive cologne, and something else. Something masculine and comforting that made my throat tight with emotion I didn't know how to process. "My name is Adrian Kane," he said, his voice gentler now that we were away from the restaurant. "And I apologize for intervening without permission, but I couldn't watch that continue." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "You don't even know me." "No," he agreed, his dark eyes holding mine with unsettling intensity. "But I know what it looks like when someone is being torn apart by people who are supposed to protect them. And I know that nobody deserves to go through that alone." There was something in the specific practical advice he offered, about not answering calls, about not engaging online, that was too pointed to be casual kindness. He suggested steps I'd only ever heard on public service announcements or whispered by friends who dealt with messy breakups. It made me wonder, not yet fully, but later more clearly, that he'd been close to situations like this before. I wanted to say something, to thank him, or question him, or maybe just break down completely. But before I could form words, a black car pulled up to the curb. Adrian opened the back door and gestured for me to get in. I can't just... I stammered, suddenly aware of how insane this was. Getting into a car with a complete stranger who just confronted my family in a public restaurant. "I have a secure apartment where you can stay tonight," Adrian said, as if reading my thoughts. "No expectations, no conditions. Just a safe place where you can figure out your next move without having to go back to whatever situation you left to come here tonight." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Or I can call you a cab and walk away right now. The choice is yours, Lily Harris." The fact that he knew my name shouldn't have been surprising given that my family had used it multiple times during their public disowning. But it still sent a shiver through me. I looked back at the restaurant, where I could see people still gathered at the windows watching us, and then at Adrian's outstretched hand, waiting patiently for my decision. I got in the car. Adrian's penthouse occupied the top floor of a building in Tribeca, and the moment I stepped inside, I understood that this man existed in a world completely different from mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, the city lights twinkling through the rain like stars brought down to earth. The space itself was massive and modern, all clean lines and neutral colors, furnished with pieces that looked like they belonged in an architectural magazine. "Guest room is down that hall, second door on the left," Adrian said, setting my small purse on the entry table. His jacket still hung around my shoulders, and I clutched it closer without thinking. "Bathroom is attached. There should be everything you need, but if something's missing, just let me know." I stood frozen in his entryway, dripping rainwater onto what was probably very expensive flooring, trying to process how my evening had gone from family dinner to complete disownment to standing in a stranger's penthouse. "I don't understand why you're doing this," I said finally. my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Adrian moved to the open kitchen, filling a kettle with water and setting it on the stove. "Tea or coffee?" he asked instead of answering. "Tea, I guess." "But you didn't answer my question." He pulled 2 mugs from a cabinet, his movements efficient and practiced. "I did something similar once," he said after a long moment. "Not exactly the same situation, but close. I reported corruption in an organization I was part of, and it cost me relationships I thought would last forever." He turned to face me, leaning against the counter. "Nobody stepped in to help me when I needed it most. I had to figure everything out alone, and it nearly destroyed me. So when I see someone going through something similar, I intervene. Simple as that." "It's not simple," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't know me. You don't know if I even deserve help. What if my family was right? What if I was just being selfish and self-righteous? Were the documents you saw real?" he asked bluntly. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. "Then you did the right thing." "Difficult doesn't mean wrong, Lily. Sometimes the hardest choices are the most necessary ones." The kettle began to whistle, and he turned to pour hot water into both mugs, adding tea bags from a container on the counter. "Your family's reaction says more about them than it does about you." He brought both mugs to the living area, setting them on a glass coffee table and gesturing for me to sit on the charcoal gray sofa. I did, sinking into cushions that felt like clouds, and accepted the mug he offered me with trembling hands. The warmth seeping through the ceramic was grounding, real, something to focus on besides the chaos in my head. "What happens now?" I asked after taking a careful sip. The tea was chamomile, soothing and familiar. "Tonight, you rest," Adrian said, settling into the armchair across from me. "Tomorrow we figure out the practical details. Do you have your own apartment?" "Yes, a studio in Brooklyn, but my family paid for some of the furniture, and my dad said he's sending movers to take it back. Can he legally do that?" I thought about it, running through what I remembered from the purchase agreements. I think so. Most of it was gifts, no paperwork saying ownership transferred to me. And honestly, I don't want to fight them over a couch and some bookshelves. Adrian nodded slowly, his dark eyes assessing me with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "What about your job?" "I work at the Brooklyn Public Library System. Assistant librarian position. Nothing glamorous, but I love it. That's entirely mine. They can't touch it." Saying it out loud made me feel slightly less unmoored. I had my job. I had my apartment. Even if it would be mostly empty soon, I wasn't completely helpless. Good. That's a foundation to build from. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "I'm going to give you the contact information for a lawyer I know. She specializes in family law and financial disputes. If your family tries to take more than they're legally entitled to, she'll make sure you're protected." "I can't afford a lawyer like that," I said automatically, already knowing what someone in Adrian's world would charge per hour. "Consider it a loan then. Pay me back when you're in a better position." His tone suggested this wasn't up for negotiation. "Tomorrow, you should also go to your bank and make sure your family hasn't tried to access any accounts with your name on them. Change passwords, add security measures, anything that creates a barrier between them and your finances." I hadn't even thought about that, but of course they might try something like that. Connor worked in finance. He'd know exactly how to cause problems if he wanted to. The realization made my stomach turn. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know why you're helping me, but thank you. You already thanked me. Stop doing that." But his voice was gentle, lacking any real reproach. "Get some rest, Lily. Things will look different in the morning." I stood, my legs feeling more stable now, and made my way down the hallway he'd indicated earlier. The guest room was beautiful in the same understated way as the rest of the penthouse, decorated in soft grays and whites with a bed that looked impossibly comfortable. The attached bathroom had toiletries still in their packaging, as if Adrian regularly kept supplies on hand for unexpected guests. I showered, washing away the rain and the feeling of dozens of eyes watching my public humiliation, then borrowed a t-shirt from the drawer of the guest room dresser that was clearly too large for me but smelled clean. When I finally climbed into bed, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face twisted in anger, my mother's tears, Sophie throwing my necklace onto the table like it was garbage. I must have dozed eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. And then, everything from the previous night crashed over me in a wave that left me breathless. My family had disowned me. A stranger had intervened. I was in his penthouse. I found Adrian in the kitchen, dressed in a fresh shirt and dress pants, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "Morning. Coffee's ready, and I ordered breakfast. Should be here in about 10 minutes. You didn't have to do that," I started, but he held up a hand. "We talked about this. Stop thanking me for basic hospitality." He poured coffee into a mug and handed it to me. "How do you take it?" "Just black is fine." I accepted the mug, cradling it between my palms. I should probably get to my apartment, start dealing with everything. "After breakfast," he said firmly. "And I'm coming with you. If your father is sending movers today, you shouldn't face that alone." I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle it myself. But the truth was, I didn't want to be alone. The thought of returning to my apartment and finding it stripped of furniture, of facing physical evidence that my family had cut me out of their lives, made me feel sick. Breakfast arrived shortly after, an absurd amount of food from what I recognized as an expensive cafe nearby. Bagels, fruit, pastries, enough to feed 5 people instead of 2. We ate at his dining table, and Adrian asked questions about my work at the library, about what I'd studied in college, about anything except my family. It felt like he was deliberately giving me a reprieve, a chance to remember I existed as something other than the daughter who'd been publicly rejected. I studied English literature, I found myself saying between bites of a blueberry muffin. Original plan was to become a teacher, but I fell in love with libraries during my practicum and shifted focus. There's something about being surrounded by stories, by all that knowledge and imagination just waiting for someone to discover it. Adrian listened with complete attention, the kind of focus that made me feel like what I was saying actually mattered. "What's your favorite part of the job?" he asked. "The kids section, honestly. Helping a 7-year-old find the perfect book. Watching their face light up when they realize reading can be an adventure, not just homework. That never gets old." I smiled despite everything, remembering a little girl last week who checked out 5 books about dinosaurs and promised to read them all by the weekend. "You're good at what you do," Adrian said. It wasn't a question. I try to be. I set down my coffee mug, studying him across the table. "What about you? What do you do that allows you to have a penthouse in Tribeca and help random strangers?" His expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I own several businesses. Real estate, import-export, some investments. Nothing particularly exciting, but it pays well." There was something in the way he said it, some careful vagueness that suggested he was leaving out significant details. But I didn't push. He'd earned the right to his privacy by respecting mine. We took a cab to my apartment in Brooklyn, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. When we climbed the stairs and I unlocked my door, I found exactly what I'd feared. My living room stripped bare except for the bookshelf I'd bought myself from IKEA and the floor lamp I'd found at a thrift store. The couch was gone. The coffee table was gone. Even the throw pillows my mother had bought me last Christmas had been taken. I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty space, and felt tears burn behind my eyes. "They didn't waste any time," I said, my voice flat. Adrian moved past me into the apartment, his expression darkening as he took in the empty room. "Do you have a list of what was here? Photos, receipts, anything documenting what they took?" "Some photos on my phone, probably." "Why?" "Send them to the lawyer I mentioned. Even if they technically owned those items, the way they went about this might constitute harassment." He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. "I'm also going to have some furniture delivered here this week. Basic stuff to replace what they took." "Adrian, no. I can't accept that. You've already done too much." He looked up from his phone, his dark eyes intense. "You can accept it? Or you can sit on the floor until you save up money to replace everything yourself. Your choice, but I'm ordering it either way." I wanted to argue, Wanted to maintain some shred of pride and independence, but looking at my empty apartment, I couldn't find the energy. Fine, I said quietly, but I'm paying you back. All of it. However long it takes. Deal. He returned his attention to his phone, and I wandered into my bedroom, relieved to find it mostly untouched. My bed was still there, my dresser, my personal belongings. At least they'd had the decency not to completely ransack my private space. When I returned to the living room, Adrian was standing by the window, looking out at the street below. "You should change your locks," he said without turning around. "If they had a key, assume they made copies before returning it." Another thing I hadn't thought of, another vulnerability I'd left exposed. "I'll call the landlord. I'll have someone here this afternoon to do it." Faster than going through official channels, he finally turned to face me. And there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. "Lily, I need you to understand that what happened last night wasn't normal family conflict. The public humiliation, the immediate retaliation, the coordinated removal of your belongings. That's calculated cruelty designed to destabilize you." "I know," I whispered. "I've always known my father could be cold, but I didn't think he'd actually go through with disowning me. I thought maybe he'd cool down, we'd talk, find some way forward. Men like your father don't cool down when they feel betrayed. They escalate." Adrian moved closer, his presence somehow both intimidating and comforting. "Promise me you'll be careful. Change your routines. Vary your schedule. Pay attention to who's around you. I don't think they'll do anything violent, but I've been wrong before." The thought that I might need to be afraid of my own family sent ice through my veins. "You really think they'd hurt me? I think your father is facing serious legal consequences because of what you reported, and people in that position don't always think rationally. Better to be cautious than sorry." He was right, of course. I nodded, trying to ignore how surreal this conversation was. 2 days ago, my biggest concern had been whether I'd get approved for a vacation day in December. Now I was discussing security measures and protection from my own family with a man I'd known less than 24 hours. "I should let you get back to your life," I said, suddenly aware that Adrian had spent his entire morning helping me when he certainly had more important things to do. "Thank you for everything. Really. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know how else to express what you've done for me. You don't need to express anything." His voice had gone soft, and when I looked up at him, I found him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "I meant what I said at the restaurant. You're not alone in this. Not if you don't want to be." The words hung between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. So instead I just nodded, and Adrian pulled out a business card, writing something on the back before handing it to me. "My personal number. Day or night, if you need anything or if something happens, call me. Don't hesitate." I took the card, my fingers brushing his briefly, and felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. Up close, I could see flecks of gold in his dark brown eyes and a small scar near his left eyebrow. He was devastatingly attractive in a way that felt almost dangerous, and I realized I'd been so focused on survival that I hadn't let myself acknowledge that fact until now. "I will," I promised, pocketing the card. "And Adrian, why did you really help me?" The truth this time. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving mine. "Because when I saw you sitting there, taking blow after blow from people who should have protected you, I saw someone with strength they didn't even know they had, and I wanted to make sure you got the chance to discover it." He stepped back, creating distance between us. "Locksmith will be here at 3. Don't open the door for anyone else." Then he left, and I stood alone in my mostly empty apartment, holding a business card with his number, and wondering what I'd just gotten myself into. 2 weeks had passed since that night at Marcello's, and I'd spent most of that time trying to convince myself that what I felt for Adrian was simple gratitude. Nothing more complicated than appreciation for a stranger who'd stepped in when I needed help most. But sitting across from Vanessa Reed, the sharp-eyed lawyer Adrian had connected me with, signing papers that would officially sever my legal ties to my family's finances, I couldn't stop thinking about him. "This should protect you from any further claims they might try to make," Vanessa said, sliding the final document across her desk for my signature. She was in her early 40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, and spoke with the kind of efficiency that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. Your father's company is under investigation, but that's separate from your personal situation. You're clean, legally speaking. Thank you, I said, signing my name with hands that barely trembled anymore. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a mess. Now I was just tired. How much do I owe you? Adrian's handling it. She collected the papers, tapping them against her desk to align them. And before you argue, he was very specific that I shouldn't accept payment from you. I wanted to protest, to maintain some independence, but I'd learned that arguing with people in Adrian's orbit was generally futile. Fine, but I'm keeping track. Eventually, I'll pay him back for everything. Vanessa's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her professional demeanor. He doesn't expect that, you know. Adrian helps people because he can, not because he wants something in return. Everyone wants something, I said quietly. Not him. Not like you're thinking. She stood, extending her hand. You're all set, Miss Harris. If your family contacts you or tries anything else, call me immediately. As I left Vanessa's office, she added almost offhand, Your mother tried to reach the firm a few times. There's been some calling and asking questions. It seemed like someone in the house is worried, if that tells you anything. That detail lodged in my chest. If my mother had been trying to contact Vanessa, it suggested cracks I hadn't expected. Maybe they weren't monolithic in their hatred, or maybe guilt was a late visitor. Either way, it complicated the neat story I'd been telling myself about enemies and allies. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to find a text from Adrian asking if I wanted to grab coffee. We'd fallen into this pattern over the past 2 weeks, meeting every few days for coffee or lunch, conversations that felt both comfortable and charged with something I didn't want to name. I texted back a yes and headed toward the cafe he'd suggested, a small place in the West Village that served overpriced lattes and had Wi-Fi slow enough to discourage people from camping out with laptops. When I arrived, Adrian was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He'd somehow remembered that I took my coffee black, no sugar, and the fact that he'd noticed such a small detail made something warm bloom in my chest. How'd it go with Vanessa? He asked as I slid into the seat across from him. Everything's signed. I'm officially no longer financially connected to the Harris family empire. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitter warmth ground me. Thank you for arranging that. And for paying for it, even though I told you not to. You're welcome. His dark eyes studied me with that intense focus I'd grown accustomed to. How are you feeling about it? Relieved, mostly. A little sad, which is stupid because they made their choice very clear. I wrapped both hands around the cup, staring down at the dark liquid. I keep thinking I should feel worse than I do. Shouldn't I be devastated? Shouldn't I be falling apart? You did fall apart. 2 weeks ago, you were barely functional. Now you're rebuilding, which is what you're supposed to do. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Give yourself credit for that, Lily. You're stronger than you think. I looked up at him, at the way the afternoon light caught the angles of his face, and felt my carefully constructed walls begin to crack. Over the past 2 weeks, I'd learned things about Adrian Kane, that he took his coffee with too much sugar, that he read philosophy books for fun and could quote Nietzsche from memory, that he had a younger brother he was protective of, and a business empire he'd built from nothing after burning bridges with his own family. But I still didn't know why he made my pulse race every time he looked at me like this, with complete attention and something that felt dangerously close to admiration. Can I ask you something? I said, my voice shakier than I intended. And I need you to be honest with me. Always. Why do you keep helping me? And don't say it's because you went through something similar or because you can. There has to be more to it than that. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his cup in a rare display of uncertainty. You want the truth? I saw something in you that night at the restaurant. Courage that you didn't even recognize in yourself. And I wanted to be around to watch you figure out just how strong you actually are. He paused, his gaze holding mine. That's the truth. Take it however you want. My breath caught, and I realized I'd been leaning forward without meaning to, drawn in by his words and his presence, and the tension that always seemed to exist between us. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Connor's name flashed on the screen and my stomach dropped. "Don't answer it," Adrian said immediately. "I have to. What if something happened to Sophie?" I accepted the call, raising the phone to my ear with a trembling hand. "Hello? Lily." Connor's voice was tight, controlled in a way that meant he was furious but trying not to show it. "We need to talk. In person." "No, we don't. Vanessa told you that all contact should go through her. This isn't about the legal stuff. This is about Sophie. She's been asking about you, and Mom's worried she's going to do something stupid like try to contact you behind everyone's back." He paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. "Meet me. One conversation. That's all I'm asking." Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. But the mention of Sophie made me hesitate. My younger sister had been silent since that night, not reaching out or responding to the single text I'd sent her apologizing for the fallout. The thought that she might be in trouble, that my one message might be the only lifeline she had, pushed aside the fear. Guilt is a powerful, stupid thing, and it was why I agreed. If Sophie truly needed me, I owed her at least that. "Fine. Where?" "That bookstore you used to drag me to when we were kids. The one in Park Slope. Tomorrow at 2. He hung up before I could agree or refuse. I set my phone down, aware that Adrian was watching me with an expression that suggested he'd heard enough of the conversation to know what had just happened. "You're not going alone," he said flatly. "Connor won't talk if you're there. He'll know you're the guy from the restaurant. Then I'll wait outside, close by, where I can get to you in 30 seconds if something goes wrong." His tone left no room for argument. "Lily, I don't trust your brother. The way they went after you was calculated, and this feels like another move in whatever game they're playing. What if he's telling the truth about Sophie? What if she really does want to talk to me? Then she can reach out herself instead of using your brother as an intermediary." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "But I know you're going to do this regardless of what I say, so I'm not going to waste energy arguing. I'm just going to make sure you're safe while you do it." The fact that he understood me well enough to know I'd already made up my mind should have been alarming. Instead, it felt like being seen in a way I'd never experienced before, like he could read all the parts of me I tried to keep hidden. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Stop thanking me." We finished our coffee in a silence that felt heavy with things neither of us was ready to say, and when we parted ways outside the cafe, I found myself watching him walk away and wondering what would happen if I admitted that this, whatever this was between us, had stopped being about gratitude a long time ago. The next afternoon, I stood outside the bookstore in Park Slope, my heart hammering against my ribs. Adrian was across the street, leaning against a building with his phone out, but his attention clearly on me. The bookstore itself was a narrow space crammed with shelves that reached the ceiling, the kind of place where you could get lost for hours and come out with a stack of books you didn't know you needed. Connor and I had spent countless afternoons here as kids, back when we'd actually been close, before college, and careers and family loyalty had driven wedges between us. Connor arrived exactly at 2, looking every inch the successful finance professional in his dark suit and Italian leather shoes. His expression was carefully neutral as he approached, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing toward the door. "Let's talk inside." We entered the bookstore, the familiar smell of old paper and coffee from the cafe in the back washing over me. Connor led us to a corner near the poetry section, where we were unlikely to be overheard. "Sophie's been a mess since that night," he said without preamble. "She cries constantly, barely eats. Mom's worried she's going to have some kind of breakdown. Then maybe you all shouldn't have forced her to participate in publicly humiliating me." I shot back, surprised by the anger in my own voice. "We didn't force her. She made her own choice. She's 21 and completely dependent on Mom and Dad for everything. What choice did she really have?" I crossed my arms, trying to create some barrier between us. "What do you want, Connor?" "Because I don't believe for a second that you asked me here out of concern for Sophie's mental health." His expression hardened. "Fine. You want me to be direct? Drop the investigation. Tell the SEC you made a mistake, that you misunderstood what you saw. Do whatever you have to do to make this go away." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. You want me to commit perjury and obstruction of justice. I want you to fix what you broke. Dad's company is hemorrhaging clients. The investigation is destroying his reputation. Our family is falling apart because you decided to play hero. Your family is falling apart because he committed crimes, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. Multiple felonies, Connor. Money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. Did you really not know, or did you just not care? I knew enough. The admission hung between us like a grenade, but I also knew that staying quiet meant protecting the people I love. You chose strangers over family, and now you want to act like you're the victim. I am the victim. You all disowned me, took my belongings, cut me off completely because I did the right thing. You destroyed us because you thought you were morally superior. Connor stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. And now you're shacking up with some criminal who intervened at the restaurant because what? He felt sorry for you? You think Adrian Kane is helping you out of the goodness of his heart? The mention of Adrian's name made my blood run cold. What are you talking about? I looked into him after that night. Adrian Kane has connections to people our father does business with. Very dangerous people. He's not some white knight, Lily. He's using you to get information about Dad's operation. That's not true. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. How much did I really know about Adrian? He'd been vague about his businesses, careful about what he shared. What if Connor was right? What if this whole thing had been some elaborate setup? Isn't it? Think about it. Random stranger intervenes in a public confrontation, offers you a place to stay, pays for your lawyer, becomes your friend. And meanwhile, the investigation into Dad's company is moving faster than it should, like someone's feeding them information. Connor's eyes were hard. He's playing you, and you're too grateful to see it. I wanted to argue, to defend Adrian, but the words stuck in my throat. Because Connor had a point, even if I didn't want to admit it. Why had Adrian helped me? What did he actually get out of this arrangement? The answers I'd accepted before, about him seeing strength in me and wanting to help, suddenly felt naive and insufficient. I need to go, I said, backing away toward the door. Lily, wait. For the first time, Connor's voice carried something other than anger. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you from making another mistake. That guy is dangerous, and if you keep trusting him, you're going to end up worse off than you already are. I didn't respond, just pushed through the door and out onto the street where Adrian was already moving toward me, his expression dark with concern. What happened? He asked immediately. Take me home, I said, my voice flat. My home, not yours. I saw the hurt flash across his face before he could hide it, but he just nodded and flagged down a cab. The ride to Brooklyn was silent, the tension between us thick and suffocating. When we pulled up to my building, I got out without looking at him, but his voice stopped me before I could close the door. Whatever he said to you, at least give me a chance to respond to it. I turned back, seeing him clearly for the first time in weeks. The expensive clothes, the controlled demeanor, the way he'd inserted himself into my life with such perfect timing. Who are you really, Adrian? And don't give me some vague answer about business investments. I want the truth. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was debating how much to reveal. Finally, he said, Come to my place tomorrow. I'll tell you everything, and then you can decide if you want me in your life or not. But not here. Not like this. Why not here? Because what I need to tell you isn't a conversation for a street corner in Brooklyn. His eyes held mine, and I saw something in them I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, maybe. Or fear. Please, Lily, give me until tomorrow. I should have said no. Should have demanded answers right then. Should have protected myself from whatever revelation was coming. But instead, I found myself nodding, agreeing to meet him at his penthouse the next evening, and watching him drive away while wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Back in my apartment, surrounded by the furniture Adrian had bought to replace what my family had taken, I pulled out my phone and stared at his contact information. My finger hovered over the call button, but I couldn't make myself press it. Because part of me was terrified that Connor was right, that everything Adrian had done was part of some elaborate manipulation. And another part of me, the part I'd been trying to ignore for weeks, was terrified that even if it was true, I'd fallen for him anyway. I stood outside Adrian's building the next evening, my hand hovering over the buzzer for what felt like an eternity. The past 24 hours had been torture, my mind spinning through every interaction we'd had, searching for signs of manipulation I might have missed. But I'd also remembered the way he'd looked at me over coffee, the careful respect he'd shown when I needed space, the small gestures that felt too genuine to be calculated. Connor's words kept echoing in my head, but so did my own instincts. And I needed to know which one to trust. I pressed the buzzer. Adrian's voice came through immediately, as if he'd been waiting. "Come up." The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual, my reflection in the polished doors showing a woman who looked far more composed than she felt. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, Adrian was standing in the living area, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray Henley that somehow made him look more dangerous than his usual tailored suits. His expression was guarded, careful, like he was preparing for a blow. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing toward the sofa. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Just water." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "And the truth. Connor said things yesterday that I can't ignore, and I need to know if any of it was real." Adrian poured 2 glasses of water from the kitchen, his movements deliberate and controlled. He brought them both to the coffee table and sat in the armchair across from me, the same position we'd occupied that first night. "What did he tell you? That you're connected to dangerous people, that you're using me to get information about my father's business, that everything you've done has been manipulation?" I met his gaze directly, refusing to look away. "Is any of that true?" "Some of it." His honesty hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had been expecting it. I do have connections that most people would consider dangerous. I've built my businesses in spaces that exist between legal and illegal, and I've made alliances with people your brother would definitely classify as criminals. My hands tightened around the water glass. "And the rest? I'm not using you for information about your father. I don't need to. I already know everything worth knowing about Richard Harris and his operation." Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his dark eyes intense. "But I'd be lying if I said my decision to help you was entirely altruistic. When I saw what was happening at that restaurant, I recognized an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To do something right." His voice softened, losing some of its hard edge. "I told you I reported corruption once and lost everything because of it. What I didn't tell you is that I rebuilt my life by compromising every principle I'd once held. I made money through methods I'm not proud of. I formed relationships with people I would have arrested in my previous life. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that was just how the world worked." He stood abruptly, moving to the window overlooking the city. "Then I saw you, sitting at that table, taking punishment for doing exactly what I'd done years ago. And I thought, maybe this is a chance to remember what it felt like to believe doing the right thing mattered. Maybe helping you was a way to prove I hadn't completely lost myself." I processed his words, trying to separate manipulation from truth. "So you used me to feel better about yourself? At first? Maybe. But Lily, somewhere between that night and now, it stopped being about redemption or opportunity or anything other than genuinely caring about what happens to you." He turned back to face me, and the vulnerability in his expression stole my breath. "I know that doesn't excuse the fact that I wasn't completely honest about my motivations, but everything I've done for you, every moment we've spent together, the way I feel when I'm around you, that's all real. How am I supposed to believe that? How do I know this isn't just another layer of manipulation?" "You don't. You can't." Adrian moved back toward me, stopping just before the coffee table that separated us. "I can give you evidence of my business dealings if you want transparency. I can introduce you to people who'll confirm that I have no interest in your father's operation. But ultimately, you're going to have to decide whether you trust me or not. And I'll understand if you can't." I stood, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through me. "Connor said you're dangerous. I am dangerous. I've hurt people who threatened me or mine. I've made decisions that keep me up at night. I exist in a world where violence is sometimes the only language people understand." He paused, his jaw tight. But I would never hurt you, Lily. That's the one thing I can promise with absolute certainty. I paced to the window. Looking out at the city lights blurring through sudden tears, I refused to let fall. I've been trying so hard to convince myself that what I feel for you is just gratitude. That once I got back on my feet and didn't need help anymore, these feelings would disappear. And? His voice was closer now, and I turned to find him standing a few feet away, giving me space but clearly struggling with the distance. And I've been lying to myself, because what I feel isn't gratitude, Adrian. It's something I don't know how to handle, something that terrifies me because I barely know you and I've already lost everything once. The words came out in a rush, months of denial breaking through carefully constructed walls. But I can't keep pretending, and I can't keep wondering what would happen if I was brave enough to admit it. Admit what? He was right in front of me now, close enough that I could see the way his chest rose and fell with careful breaths, the tension in his shoulders, the heat in his dark eyes. That I'm falling for you. That I have been since the moment you stood up in that restaurant and made me feel like I mattered to someone. That even knowing you're dangerous and complicated and probably terrible for me, I still want this. I gestured between us, at the space that felt electric with possibility. Whatever this is. Adrian's hand came up slowly, giving me time to move away if I wanted to, and cupped my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he just admitted about being dangerous. I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we cross this line, I'm not good at casual. I don't do halfway. When I care about someone, I'm all in, and that comes with complications you might not want. I'm tired of being careful, I whispered, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. I'm tired of protecting myself from anything that might hurt. Show me what all in looks like. I knew, in a small, deliberate corner of my mind, the practical costs of choosing a man like Adrian. The scrutiny, the danger, the people who lingered at the edges of his life. Choosing him was not naive. It was a decision to accept risk because the alternative was a life spent shrinking. That clarity steadied me as much as his hands did. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like I'd imagined during all those nights lying awake thinking about him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was consuming, desperate, like he'd been holding back for months instead of weeks and couldn't manage it anymore. His other hand slid into my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I pressed closer, my fingers gripping his shirt like I might fall if I let go. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I've wanted to do that since the first night, he admitted, his voice rough. When you fell asleep in the guest room and I checked on you before leaving, you looked so exhausted and vulnerable and brave that I had to physically stop myself from waking you up just to tell you everything would be okay. Why didn't you? Kiss me before now, I mean. Because you needed time to heal, to figure out who you were without your family defining you, and because I was terrified that if I pushed too soon, you'd realize you deserved better than someone like me and walk away. His thumb traced my cheekbone, his touch reverent. I still think you deserve better, but I'm too selfish to let you go without a fight. I pulled him back down for another kiss, softer this time, but no less intense, and felt something inside me settle into place. This was right, whatever complications came with it. Adrian was right. The safety I'd been craving wasn't in avoiding risk. It was in choosing who to take risks with. We moved to the sofa, sitting close enough that our legs touched, and Adrian kept one hand tangled with mine like he needed the physical connection to believe this was real. So what happens now? I asked, my head resting on his shoulder. Now I tell you everything. No more half-truths or omissions. He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I used to work for the FBI, Financial Crimes Division. That's when I reported corruption and lost everything. My partner was taking bribes from the same people we were investigating, and when I reported it, I became a target. They forced me out, destroyed my reputation, made sure I couldn't work in law enforcement anywhere. So you became what you'd been fighting against? More or less. I had skills and connections and no moral authority left to stand on. Building a business empire in the gray areas was easy when I already knew how the criminals operated. His voice was matter of fact, no self-pity. But I've never forgotten what it felt like to do the right thing and pay for it. When I saw you going through something similar, I couldn't walk away. And your connections to my father's business? I know the people he launders money for. I've done business with some of them, but I'm not involved in his operation, and I haven't shared anything about you with anyone. Your brother was fishing, trying to scare you away from me. Adrian's hand tightened on mine. The truth is, most people in my world see me as unpredictable, because I still have lines I won't cross. Helping you was crossing a different kind of line, one that made me vulnerable in ways I'd been avoiding for years. I lifted my head to look at him. What kind of line? The kind where I admit I need someone, where I let myself care about something other than survival and profit. His dark eyes held mine. You make me want to be better than I am, Lily. That's terrifying and exhilarating and completely outside my experience. I don't want you to be better. I just want you to be honest. I leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his jaw. And maybe be okay with the fact that I'm going to make you dinner sometimes and bore you with library stories and probably cry when things get overwhelming. I would never be bored by your library stories. His voice carried a hint of amusement, and I'm excellent at handling overwhelming situations. It's kind of my specialty. We talked through the night, trading histories and secrets and careful promises about what we wanted this relationship to look like. Adrian told me about his younger brother Ethan, who ran a legitimate nonprofit and pretended not to know where the funding came from. I told him about my childhood with Connor and Sophie, about the moments when we'd been close before family loyalty and moral compromises had driven us apart. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I fell asleep on his sofa with my head in his lap, and when I woke a few hours later, he was still there, one hand resting protectively on my shoulder while he read something on his phone with the other. The early morning light filtering through the windows caught the angles of his face, and I had the sudden certainty that this was what I'd been looking for without knowing it. Not safety in the traditional sense, but someone who saw all my broken pieces and sharp edges and wanted me anyway. "Morning," he said softly, noticing I was awake. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in months." I sat up, stretching muscles that protested being confined to a sofa all night. "What time is it?" "Almost 7. I need to head to a meeting in an hour, but I can cancel if you want company today." "Don't cancel. I should probably get to work anyway." The library felt like a lifetime ago, but I'd been picking up shifts again, slowly rebuilding my routine. "But Adrian, can we do this again? The talking and the honesty and maybe more of the kissing part?" His grin was genuine, transforming his usually serious face into something younger and lighter. "I think that can be arranged." He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "And Lily, thank you for giving me a chance after everything. I know it wasn't easy. It was terrifying," I admitted, "but the good things usually are." I left his penthouse that morning feeling lighter than I had in weeks, like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had finally lifted. Connor had been wrong about Adrian's motivations, or at least wrong about what mattered. Yes, Adrian was dangerous and complicated, and came with a history I was still trying to fully understand. But he was also honest now, genuinely caring, and somehow exactly what I needed, even though he was nothing like what I'd thought I wanted. My phone buzzed as I walked toward the subway, and I pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was from Sophie, my younger sister, the first contact she'd made since that night at Marcello's. The message was simple. "Can we talk? Just us. I'm sorry for everything. Please." I stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back a response. "Coffee tomorrow? I'll send you a place." Her reply came immediately. "Yes, thank you." Walking down into the subway station, I realized something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the woman who'd sat at that table taking blow after blow from her family without fighting back. I was someone who'd survived, who'd found unexpected love in the aftermath of loss, and who was finally ready to start deciding what her life would look like going forward. And whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone. 6 months had passed since that morning when Sophie first reached out, and my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. The coffee meeting with my younger sister had been painful and healing in equal measure, full of tears and apologies and careful conversations about rebuilding what our family had broken. She'd moved out of our parents' house 3 months ago, finally finding the courage to stand on her own And now we met for brunch every Sunday at a small cafe in the East Village that made the best pancakes in Manhattan. My relationship with Adrian had deepened into something solid and real, the kind of partnership I'd never known was possible. He'd kept his promise about honesty, showing me both the legitimate and questionable aspects of his business empire, trusting me with information that could destroy him if I chose to use it. I'd chosen instead to love him, complications and all, and discovered that the right person made even dangerous choices feel worthwhile. The library had promoted me to a senior position, recognizing the organizational skills I'd developed while rebuilding my entire life from scratch. I'd found an apartment I actually loved, a one-bedroom in Carroll Gardens with exposed brick and windows that let in morning light, paid for entirely with my own money. Financial independence had never felt so sweet, but today was special for reasons that had nothing to do with career advancement or personal growth. Today marked exactly 1 year since that dinner at Marcello's, and Adrian had insisted on taking me somewhere he promised would be meaningful. When the car pulled up to the restaurant where everything had started, my stomach dropped. "Adrian, I don't think—" "Trust me," he said gently, helping me out of the car. "I know it seems cruel, but there's a reason we're here." The hostess recognized us immediately, though whether from that night or from Adrian's obvious wealth, I couldn't tell. She led us through the dining room to a table near the back, and I realized with a jolt that it was the same table where my family had sat a year ago, the same spot where my life had fallen apart, and somehow, impossibly, begun again. "Why here?" I asked as we sat down, my hands trembling slightly despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Why bring me back to this place?" "Because you need to see how far you've come." Adrian reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "A year ago, you sat at this table and let people who were supposed to love you tear you apart. You believed you deserved it, that maybe you'd made a terrible mistake by doing the right thing. I remember." My voice was barely above a whisper. "And now look at you. You've built a life on your own terms. You've reconnected with your sister. You've succeeded at your job and found happiness despite everything they tried to take from you." His dark eyes held mine with that intensity I'd grown to crave. "This place doesn't have power over you anymore, Lily. You took what happened here and transformed it into strength." Tears burned behind my eyes, but they weren't sad tears. He was right. Sitting here now, with Adrian across from me and a year of growth behind me, I felt nothing but pride for the woman I'd become. The scared, broken person who'd accepted her family's judgment was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for seeing that when I couldn't see it myself." The waiter appeared with menus, and we ordered wine and pasta, falling into the comfortable conversation that had become our normal. Adrian told me about a real estate deal he'd closed that morning, one that was completely legitimate, and made him smile with genuine satisfaction. I shared a story about a teenager at the library who'd asked for help finding books about strong female characters, and left with an armful of recommendations. We were halfway through our meal when I noticed movement near the entrance, and my breath caught. My mother stood there in an elegant black dress, her expression uncertain as she scanned the restaurant. When her eyes landed on our table, she hesitated, and I saw something I'd never expected to see on Diane Harris's face. Shame. "Did you know she'd be here?" I asked Adrian, my voice tight. "No. I swear I didn't." His hand found mine across the table, grounding me. "Do you want to leave?" I watched my mother approach slowly, her usual confidence replaced by something tentative and almost fragile. Part of me wanted to run, to avoid whatever confrontation was coming. But another part, the stronger part I'd spent a year building, wanted to face this head-on. "Stay," I told Adrian. "Whatever happens, I want you here." My mother reached our table, her hands clutched around her purse like a lifeline. "Lily," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know you'd be here. I've been coming every week, hoping I might see you, that I might get a chance to talk." "Talk about what?" I kept my voice level, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing how much her presence affected me. "About how wrong I was. About how sorry I am." She glanced at Adrian, clearly recognizing him from that night. "May I sit for just a moment, please?" I looked at Adrian, who gave a slight nod, leaving the decision to me. 5 minutes, I said, and only because I'm curious what you think you can possibly say that would make any difference. My mother pulled out a chair from a nearby empty table, sitting on the edge like she might need to flee at any moment. Your father was convicted 3 months ago. He's serving a 15-year sentence at a federal prison upstate. She took a shaky breath. Connor's been called as a witness in a related case. The company is bankrupt. Everything we built, everything we thought defined us, it's all gone. And you want me to feel sorry for you? The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't find it in myself to soften them. No, I want you to know that you were right. About all of it. The corruption, the lies, the way we prioritized money and reputation over basic human decency. Tears slipped down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. I want you to know that I wake up every morning regretting what I said to you that night. How I threw away my relationship with my daughter, because I was too proud and too afraid to admit that your father had built our entire life on criminal activity. I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me and then disowned me, and felt nothing but exhausted pity. Why are you telling me this now? Because Sophie talks about you constantly. About your brunches and your conversations and how you've helped her find her own apartment and independence. And I realize that you're building a real family, the kind based on honesty and support, while I'm sitting alone in a house I can barely afford, wondering where everything went wrong. She reached across the table like she might touch my hand, then thought better of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I just needed you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were brave, and I was a coward. Adrian's hand squeezed mine under the table, a silent reminder that I didn't have to respond with anything other than honesty. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, looking at this woman who'd once had so much power over me, and realizing she had none anymore. I forgive you, I said finally, and watched shock flash across her face. Not because you've earned it, or because I think we're going to have some tearful reconciliation. I forgive you, because holding on to anger has been exhausting, and I'm done letting what you did define how I move forward. Lily, but forgiving you doesn't mean I want you in my life. You made your choice a year ago, when you threw my necklace on a table and told me I was nothing to this family. I've built something better without you. Something real and honest and good. And I'm not interested in risking that by letting you back in. I stood, Adrian rising smoothly beside me. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Mom. I really do. But you're not going to find it with me. My mother's face crumpled, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. But I felt nothing but relief as I walked away. Adrian's arm came around my waist, steady and supportive, and we left the restaurant together without looking back. Outside, the evening air was cool and crisp, autumn settling over the city with the promise of change. Are you okay? Adrian asked, his voice gentle. I'm better than okay. I'm free. I turned to face him, taking in the man who'd somehow become my entire world. A year ago, her rejection destroyed me. Now it's just sad and distant, like something that happened to someone else. You've grown into someone remarkable. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. And I know I tell you this constantly, but I need to say it again. I love you, Lily Harris. Not despite your complications or your history, but because of who you became in spite of it all. I love you too. The words came easily now, no longer scary or uncertain. You saved me that night. But more than that, you gave me space to save myself. Adrian's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Speaking of space and saving, I have something I want to show you. Another reason we came here tonight. He pulled out his phone, opening up a series of documents and photos. Remember how I told you I wanted to do something meaningful with the legitimate side of my business? I've been working on establishing a foundation that helps people who report corruption, provides them with legal support, financial assistance, housing if they need it. Everything you needed a year ago but had to cobble together through luck and my intervention. I stared at the documents, at the mission statement that could have been written about my exact situation. Adrian, this is incredible. I want you to run it. He watched my face carefully. I know you love the library, and I'm not asking you to give that up completely. But this foundation needs someone who understands what it's like to lose everything for doing the right thing. Someone who knows how to rebuild from nothing. And I can't think of anyone better qualified than you. I don't have experience running a foundation. You have experience surviving the thing this foundation exists to address. That's more valuable than any business degree. He took my hands in his. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Think about it. Talk to Sophie about it. Take whatever time you need. But Lily, you could help people the way I tried to help you. You could be the person for them that you needed a year ago. The idea settled over me like possibility crystallizing into purpose. He was right. I knew exactly what people in my situation needed because I'd lived it, struggled through it, emerged on the other side stronger for it. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Is this your way of proposing that we build something together? Not marriage necessarily, but a real partnership that goes beyond just being in love. Adrian's grin was slow and devastating. Maybe. Is that something you'd be interested in? Yes. I didn't hesitate, didn't second guess. Yes to the foundation. Yes to building something meaningful together. Yes to whatever comes next as long as we face it as a team. He kissed me then, right there on the street outside the restaurant where we'd first met. And I felt the last piece of my old life finally let go. When we broke apart, I saw Sophie walking toward us, her blonde hair catching the streetlight, and a smile on her face that matched my own. Sorry I'm late, she said, slightly out of breath. The subway was a disaster. Did I miss the big moment? You knew about this? I asked, looking between her and Adrian. He called me last week to make sure you'd be open to the idea. Sophie pulled me into a hug, her voice dropping to a whisper. I told him you'd been looking for purpose beyond just surviving, that you'd been talking about wanting to help people but didn't know how. This is perfect for you, Lily. You know that, right? I did know. Standing there with Adrian and Sophie, the chosen family I'd built from the wreckage of the one I'd lost, I knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where I was supposed to be, not defined by my parents' crimes or my family's rejection, but by the choices I'd made and the strength I'd discovered when everything else had fallen away. So, what do we do now? I asked, looking at both of them. Now we celebrate, Adrian said, gesturing toward a different restaurant across the street, one that held no painful memories. Dinner with family, the real kind, based on choice and honesty and love. Sophie looped her arm through mine. And then we start planning. The foundation needs a name, a mission statement that's personal but professional, office space, hiring plans. This is going to be amazing, Lily. You're going to help so many people. As we walked together toward the restaurant, I glanced back one last time at Marcello's, at the place where the worst night of my life had somehow transformed into the catalyst for the best year. My mother was probably still inside, processing our conversation and her losses. My father was in prison, paying for his crimes. Connor was facing his own legal battles, consequences of choices he'd made long before I'd ever reported anything. And me, I was walking toward a future I'd built with my own hands, surrounded by people who loved me not because they had to, but because they chose to. The woman who'd sat at that table a year ago, accepting punishment for doing the right thing, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, braver, ready to take the pain she'd experienced and transform it into purpose. Adrian caught my hand as we reached the door of the new restaurant, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. No more looking back, he said softly. Only forward from here. Only forward, I agreed, and walked inside to begin the next chapter of a story I was finally writing for myself.